Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's been a little while. We're back here today to talk about some CSL moves and off season, and some crazy things have happened today. Hence, we're doing a bit of an emergency podcast. I'm joined today by one of the regulars to the channel and to the cast, Denver GM Miles, who's also an administrator now. Is that right, Miles, for the forum as well? You've taken on an additional role.
Yeah, I kicked Doug out of it. It was a very forceful overtake of the league. I just didn't feel Doug was doing a very good job. We've replaced him as well in real life. So Green Bear isn't actually Doug either. It's TJ. TJ has two teams now, just so everyone knows.
There's just been a massive coup on the
Huge,
forum, and
huge coup. I flew out to Philly. John and I did this whole kidnapping thing. John was in on the take all along. No, in all seriousness, Doug's been fantastic, but I think for a little over a season or maybe even 2 seasons now, he's been ready to kind of, just be a GM again and be able to focus on that. There's being in the CSL and being in sim leagues in general is very different depending on whether you're an admin or just a GM. And so Doug was ready to go back to, being a GM, and, I'm always ready and happy to take on more responsibility with the league. So, that's just how it happened.
good. I think it's worth saying, the way the guys do behind the scenes, and Doug has done behind the scenes before he stepped down this year is what kind of keeps the league going, and it's fantastic, really, and it's why we have these conversations and why we enjoy the league so much. So long way to continue, but we're not here to talk about you in your new role, in your moving into your dictatorship role. We're actually here today to talk about some crazy things that have happened on the forum since the trade office opened up. Probably, I'm guessing, about 4 or 5 hours ago now. And surprisingly,
whatever time I woke up and saw everyone crying about it already, so I was like, fine.
And surprisingly, it's been chaotic, but it's not actually been as chaotic as the real NBA so far. But there's been some interesting trades, hasn't there, Miles?
Yeah, definitely. I knew people had a lot of stuff working on in the background, and there's definitely some big trades, for sure. And the day the trade office opens, what is it, day 30 of the regular season, when all the trade restrictions are lifted, are like two of the biggest days as far as CSL trade activity goes. So, we all kind of knew this was coming.
Yeah, you could sense on some of the chatter that it was going to be a busy off season for a lot of teams, and I don't think we're going to necessarily cover every trade here that's happened, or every trade that is going to happen, because we know there's certainly some very big ones in the background that haven't been posted yet. But let's dive in and talk about a couple of the major ones that have happened, and just get some initial thoughts from yourself. So we'll start with probably the biggest one, I think, the Houston, Atlanta, Boston deal, which was originally Houston, Atlanta, and it's now been extended. Obviously, this talks about moving Exum, one of the star players in the league, over to Atlanta for Karl-Anthony Towns, one of the upcoming rookies. But the deal's been expanded a little bit more, hasn't it, Miles, now?
Yeah. Boston was not originally in this deal, but obviously one of the reasons why we didn't want to open the trade office too early is that stuff like this happens a lot, where a team posts a trade and then next thing you know, it's reworked 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And, this is one of them. It's nothing inherently wrong with that, but, it just gives teams opportunity to get in on deals they otherwise wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great example of some of the back and forth that goes on during draft day. Obviously, we know now that the likes of the pick number 6, there was a discussion between Houston and Boston around who's taking who, and a bit of nervousness, which probably resulted in some of the moves here and some of the essentially trading down by Boston for 14 to get 19 and 27. What are your initial thoughts on this side of the deal? We talked probably about Exum and Karl-Anthony Towns previously on the forum, but interested to get your thoughts on the extension of this deal.
Yeah, for Boston, for me, I really like not ignoring how the picks turned out. Like from a theory perspective, I like this trade from Boston for Boston because I think this is a draft where once you got around to like pick 13 or 14, there was a long list of players that all kind of were similarly talented but different in terms of fit. And where that talent lies. But I don't think necessarily that there's going to be a huge talent difference between pick 14 and pick 27. Like obviously, there is a little one, but I at the end of the day, I'm not so certain how much better Justin Patton will be than Ike Anigbogu, because I think there were a few of those tiers in the draft this year, and I think there was a big middle tier. So from that perspective, I think the draft, I think this trade works out really well for Boston. And then as far as the players picked, again, I think this trade works out really well for Boston. And Anigbogu is a Justin Patton light. They're both going to be very efficient offensive players. Patton's a little bit more well-rounded, but not so much so that I feel that the difference in another first-round pick, a future first-round pick, getting off Devin Marble's contract, although he is a good role player. If I remember correctly, that contract is on the longer side. Oh no, it's just 1 more year and then a team option. So I guess not that bad. But anyway, the point is, I think from a talent perspective, this works out well for Boston, especially getting that future first on top of turning Patton into 2 quality players.
Yeah, I think this is some standard stuff that we've seen from Boston over the past couple of years, where they've sort of been not really rebuilding, it's more retooling what they've been doing. They've just been gathering picks and moving players around, and they have a ton of depth basically, and they kept constantly playing with it. So for me, I think they weren't sold on Patton at 14. They weren't sold on anyone really at 14. So for them to sort of essentially double down, pick up a future pick, and pick up 2 guys who they felt were just as good as Patton, it makes perfect sense. For me, I think that the ace in the hole on this deal sits with Houston. I mean, we've talked about Marble, and yeah, he's a solid role player. I mean, not long contract, but I think the thing that's fantastic they managed to pick up, obviously it was part of the Karl Anthony Towns deal, was pick number 6, which they managed to get Malik Monk, which is an underrated piece, I think, in this deal.
Oh, absolutely. Malik Monk is, I think, one of the best scorers in this draft. He might even end up being the best scorer in this draft as far as efficiency and just ability to get shots up. That's about all he can do, but that's kind of the most important thing in a game of basketball, technically speaking. And I think that if you just look at what Houston received, you can see 3 future starters of like a quality playoff team. Maybe not next year, but in 2-3 seasons. I mean, there's your shooting guard, power forward, and center right there.
Yeah, shaping up very nicely for them. Obviously, still some major gaps to fill, but that's certainly a great start for them on their rebuild that they started last season.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's move on to the team that's probably been the most active so far, which is no surprise. In real life, they're active. They've managed to land LeBron James in CSL. They haven't quite managed to land LeBron James. They're sort of going through the period that the Lakers had in real life 2 years ago, where they just completely tanked out. The initial deal here, obviously, trading away Chris Middleton, who they got for Kevin Durant in their season, primarily to get their first round pick back. Some mixed discussion on the forum, Miles. What are your thoughts on this one?
I understand when you're looking at this deal and you're looking at it and you go, oh, they only got 1 first for Chris Middleton, and that's it. And it's easy, you think other players have fetched more. Middleton's a talented young player. I don't think that there was any asset the Lakers could value more than getting their own first round pick back this upcoming draft. One of the things that I faced when I took over the Denver Nuggets was realizing that I was going to have to delay my rebuild because I had a year where I didn't have my own pick. And so while I could have started my rebuild right then and there, and I started the pieces of it, there was no incentive, no purpose in bottoming out. That's why I went and got guys like Al Jefferson and Jeremy Lin and that free agency and turned them into assets, but not having my own first round pick definitely has slowed down the process. And looking back on it, I had the opportunity to trade for it. I thought that Dallas, who had the pick at the time, was asking for too much, and they were, almost extortion level of trying to, get me to trade for my pick back. And I just, at the end of the day, I didn't feel like I could justify it at that time. But looking back, I kind of wish that I had just gone for it, because it would have made the rebuild so much simpler. So you look at the trade right now, and if you ignore the context, yeah, Chris Middleton for one first round pick, even a top one, isn't that great. But when you consider the fact that it's going to kickstart the Lakers rebuild, it's going to allow them to get started on that right away, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, and absolutely, I can completely understand where they're coming from. Similar situation. I took over Portland. We didn't have any draft picks, so we had to kind of do a little bit of a divert in terms of how I was going to build that team. But in the Lakers sense, giving up Middleton, who, he didn't perform particularly well for them. He's coming off of his rookie deal, so he's going to get a bumper salary next year. Let's be honest, he's going to get silly money from some of these teams, looking at some of the other moves they've made. So he's in line for a payday. Lakers make sense. They can, bottom out this year, hopefully use that draft pick to get someone who is on a level of Chris Middleton, hopefully, who is far, far cheaper, a little bit younger, and they'll hold him for at least 4 years until they have to pay him. So for me, it makes perfect sense. There's been some initial discussions on this one that the Lakers were a little bit too quick to make this move. Do you think that's necessarily right, or should they have?
It would take quite the package to beat getting your own first back when you're in the Lakers position, knowing that, right? Like you talked about not having your picks, but you also were in a position where you could obtain assets, right? You came in and you had Kevin Durant, right? You were the one that traded KD.
Yep.
Yeah, so you had that trade chip, and Middleton is no Kevin Durant. Middleton honestly I don't think he could have fetched too much more than the Lakers' own first back. I mean, maybe you get like a late first on top of this, or maybe you get this and I don't know, some other player on his rookie deal, but not a good one, right? You might get like a role player on his rookie deal. I don't think you're getting so much more that it makes more sense contextually speaking. And as far as Middleton, like I love Middleton. I think Middleton's great. I know a lot of people think Middleton's great, but keep in mind that he is essentially like Klay Thompson, right? Real life Klay Thompson. He's one of the best 3-and-D players, but he's not. I don't think Middleton has the ability to lift up a team. I think he has the ability to enhance a very good team, to be a part of a championship team, but he can't be your best player. That's how I feel about him. And so I think the Lakers knew that they couldn't keep him and rebuild, because I just don't think it makes sense for them. In a vacuum, could they have gotten more value? Yes. But I don't think when you consider context, anything would have beat what they're getting here.
No, and I think it's a perfect situation, because I think if you look at this from the Bulls side, we know Marcus is never going to go into a full rebuild with the Bulls. He's got his top pick this year in Markkanen and Gullo, who we'll talk about him probably in a draft podcast sometime next week, but steal of the draft, absolutely. So putting someone like Middleton, who said that's similar to real life Klay Thompson, into that mix, and that team looks like a solid playoff team, even before you look at the huge amount of cap space they have.
Yeah, and Marcos is a solid GM. I mean, I have no doubt that he'll be able to put together a winner there in Chicago very quickly. And like you said, he's already got a couple of really quality players. He's got some good front court players, especially if they retain why am I drawing a blank on his name? He used to play for Cleveland. Big man. John L. Stokes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, were you about to say you're thinking of Tyler Stone? Because that's all I could think of.
No, I was thinking of Bryce Johnson, but I didn't remember him playing for Cleveland.
No. John L. Stokes. If they retain him, they've got a couple of good front court players. So I think Chicago is going to be in the playoffs next year, but not a championship team, but a playoff team to be sure.
No, a playoff team which is young and developing. That's where I think it's going to go, but good move for them, certainly. So if we look at some of the other Lakers moves, so one of the others was essentially sending out probably going to be a high second round pick for Kiefer Sykes from the Rockets. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is good value for someone like Sykes? Do you think it's the right move for the Lakers to take on his contract?
I mean, Kiefer Sykes is such a strange player. Like, just he's a strange player. I mean, he's his best skill is that he will shoot the ball. And he's really good inside. I mean, he's good at making his shots around the rim, and so there's value in that. But he's a really poor ball handler, which limits his ability inside because he's going to get the ball stripped from him going to the basket. And he has that ridiculously long contract. I mean, he's under contract for 4 more seasons. The price that they gave up was nothing. I mean, sure, a high second round pick. But I mean, we see those get traded around like candy in this league. Doesn't matter whose second round pick they are. I just don't know how he fits in Los Angeles, other than just being a guy who can, score. But I mean, do the Lakers plan on utilizing him in a winning capacity over the next 4 seasons? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
It was a head scratcher for me as well. I didn't necessarily understand this one. It was, for me, this one screamed of just making a trade for the sake of a trade, than actually really sitting and thinking about long term what you wanted to do with this. I mean, for the Rockets, this is fantastic. So just dump Sykes' contract for basically nothing. So
it looks like I was just reading finally the reasoning, and it looks like he made this trade back when he thought he would be keeping Middleton, and so maybe there were some grand delusions of making the playoffs with Middleton in the next few years, and Sykes can play like a 6-man role there. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think the best thing though for Tim here is to play Kiefer, and hope that a playoff team over the next season or two thinks that he's the missing piece to their playoff run, because I mean, maybe that he can play a role on the next winning Lakers team, but that's so far down the road that who knows.
Yeah, I mean, the positive is it's only 8 million, which is easy enough to move.
Max contracts get moved around in this league, so yeah, you can move an $8 million contract.
Someone might buy on it. I mean, initially, off the top of my head, a team that might be interested a bit further down the line, possibly Atlanta, if they just need to add talent anyway necessary, if they're going all in with Exum. I don't know how that would fit, but that's just a team off the top of my head I could think that is looking to change direction quite quickly. Don't have that much in terms of assets that they could offload. So possibly something there.
It reminds me of the deal that I made this year trading Lance Stevenson. He ended up in Toronto. And it's literally just comes down to a team that is good, thinks that they can be great, and thinks that all they're really missing is a little bit of bench depth. And Sykes can be that.
Yeah. And then the final deal that the Lakers pulled off in the few short hours that we've had the trade office open was this one, which was again a draft day deal, but essentially sending the rights to Luke Kennard to the Indiana Pacers for Tyler Stone and a future first round pick.
I love this trade for the Lakers.
I was when Tim told me about this, I was absolutely flabbergasted that Indiana even offered this deal.
I mean, that's an unprotected first round pick.
Yeah. For a team that's
3 drafts
playoff team at the moment.
Yeah, in 3 drafts from now.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows where Indiana will be? Who knows what the draft class will look like? And I mean, Luke Kennard is going to be fine. He's not a bad player. I mean, he's already a very good 3-point shooter. A really good jump shooter. He's going to fit in fine on the wing. And based on the scout that I have of him, I mean, he could be, emphasis on the word could here, could be Chris Middleton light, or someone else that just shoots threes, maybe Bradley Beal level of talent. But but an unprotected first round pick, 3 drafts down the line, a player in Tyler Stone who ask 8 different GMs of what they think of Tyler Stone, you're likely to get 8 different answers. But I think he's a really good big man. I tried getting him from Washington and was unable to. And I think Lakers will be able to certainly get something for him during the season this year because any contender could use a player like him. I don't see Tyler Stone being on the Lakers past the trade deadline. So yeah, I think this is a great trade for Los Angeles, and I think this is a desperate. I really wanted my guy overpay from the Pacers.
Yeah, absolutely. This just screams of someone wanting to jump into the draft any means possible, and just throwing money away. Basically, I mean, Tyler Stone's an expiring. Lakers can certainly either use him for that, or they, like you said, a playoff team will want him. I like Tyler Stone. I think he adds a lot of value, even just in his efficient scoring and his rebounding. If that's the only thing he does, he's still good at it. Um, the killer in this is that first round pick. I mean, the Lakers get another asset for their rebuild. And let's be honest, I don't even know where that Pacers team's going to be in that 3 years' time. I mean, that's just a mixed bag of players and personnel there. And Heagrad's got to get that right before they get to that stage. Otherwise, that could be a lottery pick, certainly.
Yeah, the really difficult thing about this is I've felt firsthand, not in the CSL, but in prior leagues, how difficult it can be to improve your team when you've already traded future first round picks, because a lot of times you want to make that move at the deadline to put your team over the top. A team that you think is going to go far in the playoffs. And if you don't have those first round picks available, it is really hard to be able to make those kind of marginal moves. And so Indy might be another thing that they regret. Like next season, for example, next season, the 2024 first round pick would be the middle of the 3 that are available to trade, which means you can't trade your 2023 or 2025 pick, which means you can't trade any of your first round picks unless you get one back. And that makes things more difficult when you're looking to improve marginally, for a playoff run.
Yeah, and it's exactly why I think Atlanta are going to struggle this year. In that, yes, they've made a big trade to get Exum, but they've got that problem. They've not got that middle pick, and if they send one of their picks away, then I think they might have their middle pick, but whichever way it works, that they basically, for them to send a first round pick away, they have to receive one back, which makes it very complicated in trade discussions because a lot of GMs don't want to send that pick away because that's where the value is for them. So yeah, interesting for the Pacers, questionable decision, but awesome bit of business by Tim and the Lakers there.
Actually, I just looked at their picks. Unless Indiana gets a first round pick in 23 or 24 soon, I don't know if they have a trade lined up for one or posted one. They won't be able to make this trade.
Really?
Yeah, because they would not have a first round in 23 or 24. So I don't know. I don't think they have any other trades posted.
Oh, that could complicate it.
I don't see Indiana or the Pacers in the trade office otherwise. So I hope they have something else lined up, or else Tim might be stuck with Kennard.
Let's hope so.
I mean, you know how he feels about that. So
okay, so moving on to the next sort of major deal that's happened so far. Sort of a 4-team trade that's kind of evolved around Drew Holiday heading over to Washington for Boban, TJ Warren, who's headed to Boston, and Boban's kind of headed back into the Detroit. Atlanta sort of just thrown in, I think, just for some salary by the looks of it. But big pieces here is probably Drew Holiday going to Washington and Boban going over to Detroit. What do you think this pushes Washington higher up into the Western Conference now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's any other way to look at it, because as good as Boban is, and he's got some amazing ratings, he can't really stay on the court very well. And Warren had seen his minutes get cut pretty dramatically this past season. I think Warren, represented a player that had much more trade value than actual value. Not that he capitalized on it, considering all he got for Warren was the 45th pick in this draft. But I think that Drew Holiday is the best player in this trade for next season. And that's going to be a difference maker for Washington, because everyone seems to agree that Drew Holiday is a shooting guard now. And Washington has Milos Teodosic to the point guard. So now you've got a really strong 1-2 in the backcourt there with Milos and Drew.
Yeah, I should clarify. Washington in the Eastern Conference. I don't know why I said Western Conference, but yeah, I think this certainly helps Washington massively. They get that backcourt sorted, which we know. I mean, I don't know about you, but I tend to find that more troublesome than the actual front court. I tend to find it's easier to find value players in the front court than the back court.
Oh, absolutely. I have my front court. I've been trying to build out my back court. It is not easy. It is not easy to build out a back court.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for Washington, go over to their sort of their initial roster that they've got at the moment, who's contracted, but yeah, I mean they'll need to build out that front court, but you know they've got personnel who can do a job there, and if they can, you know, with Holiday and Milos in the backcourt, they're going to be solid there. That means basically they're going to be a mid-tier playoff team without any moves, I think. So it's a great deal for them.
Right. And I know another trade Washington has lined up that will send out a backcourt player and get a front court player in return. And this will make more sense when the trade's posted and everyone knows what I'm talking about. But thinking about the backcourt player that they're sending out with Boban and the front court player they're getting back with Drew Holiday, I much prefer what they're receiving versus what they're sending out. I think they're massively upgrading their team with these two moves.
Yeah, I mean, I think half the league knows what the other deal is, but yeah, certainly once that's gone through, that means Washington is probably an underdog in the Eastern Conference now, with Detroit making some moves, and we don't necessarily know what they're going to do. Toronto not having a GM is always questionable, so I wouldn't write them off at all in that Eastern Conference this year.
Yeah, East is going to be wide open. It seems that Detroit still hasn't traded Kemba or KCP, but I don't think it's going to take long before someone finally ponies up what Detroit feels Kemba is worth, considering he's been in like every conference finals ever, or something like. I mean, the Kemba is. I don't know if there's like a bug in the game that thinks Kemba has to be, a winner in the playoffs, but it's certainly working for him.
Yeah.
But I think the East is going to be wide open this year. I mean, no disrespect to teams like Cleveland and Boston, who have done well and will continue to do well. But, this is the first year where, Detroit isn't going to be a major contender. Chicago, who was a 60-plus win team for so many years, is now, still in the midst of their rebuild. Toronto's GM-less. Other teams are still on the rise, like Brooklyn, Miami. We're just Orlando doesn't have Paul George anymore. There's just so much turmoil in the East. I feel that this is definitely, if there's a year where a random team comes out of the East, this is going to be that year.
Yeah, and it's a perfect storm for Washington to sail through, I think, with some of the moves that they've made here and some of the moves they are going to make. What do you think about it from Detroit's point of view? Obviously, sending Holiday away to get Boban, pick 28, which we know is a newbie now, and Wesley Saunders.
Yeah, I mean, Saunders to me, he fulfills the salary requirement. He's fine. I don't think he's anything special. Boban, I think and John has experience with players like Boban in terms of trying to make sure to keep them on the court, because he's been doing that with Hassan Whiteside for the last few years, trying to make sure that he can stay on the court. So I think he'll be able to get the most out of Boban, who has he's got some of the best rebounding ratings. He's really efficient, and he has good enough defensive ratings that along with him being 7'3", I think is going to make a difference in terms of Boban being able to perform. And so I think that Washington is getting a good return for Drew. Is it the most they could have gotten? Maybe not. But given the direction that they're going and given that they want to make sure that they actually move everyone this offseason, I think this is a great deal.
Yeah, and I think your dog agrees with that as well. So
It sure does.
so
He wanted Drew. Uh, yeah, he likes Drew. That's what my dog
good.
says.
He's a Drew fan. So I think we won't talk about Atlanta because some seconds for Wesley Saunders, we don't really care about that.
Or whatever.
The Boston deal, I think, is. I'll just before we move on, I just will comment. I think this is another one of those standard Dennis buy low, sell high things. He's basically
He is
giving away
buying
nothing.
low for sure.
Yeah, he's basically got TJ Warren for nothing, and he's going to do his absolute utmost to promote him and sell him on for more value, I think.
Yeah, I a couple of times have had trade talks with Washington where the thing with Warren to me is he has had good seasons in the past. Like you look at his 2018 season, in 28 minutes a game, he was averaging 16 points. He was shooting 48%. I mean, the guy is one of those players that you could easily play on any second unit and really get a lot out of. But he just doesn't really bring a whole lot else to your team. Like he's not an accomplished rebounder. He's an okay defender. The best thing you can say about him is that he doesn't turn the ball over too much either. And so he, in that aspect, you can give him the ball and just kind of keep him going on offense. But I always had left myself wanting more from Warren before I traded for him, and I just never really saw that from him. So he's going to be a great piece on a team, and he's definitely worth more than the 45th pick in a draft. So no matter what Boston gets for him, they're going to be on the plus side of that deal. But you're right. This is definitely a good reclamation project for Boston.
Yeah, and they always have one every season, so it's no surprise they picked one up straight away when the trade office opened. So let's move on to the final deal that I think we should talk about, which is, again, probably one of the interesting ones that's happened so far, which is just a straightforward deal between Houston and Miami. Miami giving up the second pick from last year, Dragon Bender, pick 34 this year, and a whole bunch of seconds for what is essentially pick 18 and a future first round pick. Is this finally Miami admitting that they messed up on the draft last year with this selection?
It is both Miami slightly admitting that they messed up. They didn't. I don't think they'll ever actually come out and say it. But they've been shopping Bender for a long time, and so that alone is enough to tell us that he does know that they messed up on that a little bit. But I still think Houston managed to overpay somehow for a player who was the number 2 pick last year. Because I just think Bender lost so much value this past season, and I mean, if any team can experiment with a guy and find something that we don't see, it's going to be Houston. But I don't know. I don't know about this trade.
Do you think he's going to pair well with Karl Anthony Towns at all?
Yes, because he has a high passing rating and therefore won't take shots away from Karl Anthony Towns. In fact, he might pass the ball to Karl Anthony a lot. So yes, he'll pair well in that he won't take the ball out of Towns' hands.
So this could possibly be Houston thinking that he could be a starter for them in the long term on a cheap rookie deal to Karl.
Yeah, maybe. He doesn't have great rebounding ratings. His defensive abilities are just the defensive rating. He's not a great shot blocker. He's not a great. He was not going to force a ton of turnovers. His passing rating, while high, and that's good, is also too high for him to be aggressive offensively. And I don't even know what his shooting ratings are like, but his shooting certainly wasn't pretty this past season.
No, he's a 40% shooter, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he did shoot 38% from 3. So best case scenario, Houston has found a stretch 4 that can do a little more than just shoot, a la Ryan Anderson. But I would just wish that his rebounding was a little bit better for a guy who's 7'1". That's really I think my biggest concern with him being a stretch 4 is that he just isn't a rebounder.
Okay, so if you think Houston have possibly paid a little bit too much for him. What do you think of the return for Miami then, in terms of who they picked up with that 18th pick and the future first round pick, which will be Cleveland's?
I mean, the problem for me is unfortunately I just didn't scout either Svi or the Gerard Blossom game, whatever. And so I don't know enough about either one of those players to really know like how this deal works out from that aspect. I'm trying to pull up the combine right now so I can at least say their current shooting ratings.
Yeah. So
I
yeah,
know Blossom.
I just wanted you to say his name.
Oh God, he's a Laker and I don't know how to say his name. I'll do my best. It's Sviatoslav Mikhailik,
Not
which
bad, not bad.
it cannot be any worse than how I tried to pronounce back before he was in the NBA. Nemanja Bjelica was in the NLL, and I am on record on a podcast calling him Bajelica. So it can't be worse than that. But I mean, if based on his combine, Svi looks like a gunner. And he and the biggest thing for me, and one thing that I found is it's really easy to find guys that can shoot but don't have the scoring rating to take advantage of that. Right? They've got the skills, they've got the percentage, but you can never get them to actually shoot the ball enough. And he's got the scoring rating to just fire away. And so that's good for Miami. And then that future first, I mean, that's probably going to be conveyed next year because I imagine Cleveland will be one of the 10 best teams next year. But the fact that it's, if Cleveland finishes, let's say with the 19th pick, and then maybe they blow up, and that pick is really good in 2020. I mean, there's a world where they give up a lottery pick, where Houston just gave up a lottery pick. It's not likely, but even just that small chance just makes me, I don't know. I wouldn't give up 2 firsts for Bender. Looking at this deal, I would have just told Miami, hey, I'll give you 18 for Bender if you want to just do that. Ignore the seconds. We'll do 18 for Bender. And I think Miami might have taken that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised. I guess it depends on what Houston's thinking, but I'm surprised they didn't at least try and get someone like Beverly back, who could have filled a bit of a void for them at point guard, really. But yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think it's an overpay for Bender, and I think it's Miami finally, even though they're not officially admitting, but through the trade admitting that they messed up and they should have absolutely taken Milos with pick number 2, and that's that combined with some of the decisions they've made over the offseason so far, kind of wonder what direction the Heat are going in.
Yeah, I mean, Miami is just one of those teams. They kind of make a lot of moves, and sometimes they're head scratching. But I think at the end of the day, at the end of it all, they kind of are making moves in the right direction, towards being a better team. And while a few of those moves have not turned out the way they expected them to, obviously Bender being the obvious example, I think that they're going to be one of the top teams in the Southeast for the next few years.
Yeah. They still have so much talent. They're bound to be, but the ceiling I think is lowered for them now. But I think that kind of wraps up some of the initial trades that we've seen. Probably since we've been talking about this, Miles, there's probably been other trades, no doubt, and we'll have to come back and talk about them a little bit later, perhaps alongside a bit of a free agency podcast. But as always, it's been great to have you on. Great to hear your thoughts on some of the trades. Is there anything being worked up in Denver at the moment in terms of the off season or trades that are happening?
I'm trying, but not really. And I don't have a lot of cap space. I don't think I have any cap space. I think I'm going into the off season with no cap space, and so I might use my mid-level exception, but I think it's going to be another slow and steady year. I don't think we're necessarily going to be a playoff team this year, and it's just going to be kind of like, seeing how things work out with Josh Jackson here with the rest of the nucleus. I'm in no rush. The oldest player of my core players is 25 years old. 27, and Willie Cauley-Stein. But the rest of my team is 25 or under, so I've got time, and I've waited long enough. I can wait one more year. So
Yeah, slow rebuild, but I'm delighted you got Jackson because he was my favorite player in that draft. So I'll be interested to see how he does for you this season.
yeah, I'll be honest, I was really concerned that Philadelphia wasn't actually going to take ball number two. Because for me, there were three players in this draft that I think were in the top tier, and that was Ingram, Markkanen, and Jackson. So there was definitely a part of me that was worried that Philly would take either Markkanen or Jackson and really screw things up because I know Marcos knew about Jackson, but I lucked out, so it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, always great when you get a little bit of luck, and yeah, hopefully, whilst the off season's quiet for you, it will certainly be interesting to view from a neutral perspective anyway. But
Yeah. Well, actually, there is one thing working for me, and that's the fact now that I've stepped up here is means that it won't be a boring off season because I'll have plenty to do.
yeah,
And John and I were discussing what to do with Charlotte and Toronto and Golden State. And I told him it seems like your offseason is gonna be a lot more fun than mine, so I'll just take over all three of these teams for the offseason. So I'll at least we get to make some moves, do something fun. It's one of the benefits of being a crappy team and being an admin. You get to live vicariously through other teams.
yeah, you get to make some outrageous decisions for some of the teams, and nobody knows who's done it. But you've given the game away now, so
I'm not. It won't be anything outrageous. I look. Toronto and Golden State are both on very good paths. And I just want to make sure. I even messaged Kyrus, Biz when the draft was going on. I said, hey, listen, Golden State, this is what we need because I'll be working them this offseason. So please get us some good talent. So if Denver was good, it'd be a whole different story because I'd be looking to sabotage Golden State maybe a little bit, but we're not good, so it's okay.
No, it's great to have you on, Miles. We'll catch up in another podcast, I'm sure, over the off season.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Thanks for having me on as always.